Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to my YouTube channel Master That English, where we understand, analyze and interpret the important texts and concepts that may be part of your English curriculum. Our lecture for today, we shall explore the lyric sonnet and study the Sonnet 116 by William Shakespeare. So get your pens and notepads ready, cause here we go. Before we begin, let's have a quick overview of the poet William Shakespeare. Now, who was William Shakespeare? You would be surprised to know that he hails from a very humble background, and surprisingly, there is no record of university education in William Shakespeare's life. This means he was homeschooled. That was the reason why his contemporaries like Robert Greene were jealous of William Shakespeare's popularity. In a pamphlet titled Goat's Worth of Wit, Greene ridiculed William Shakespeare by calling him an upstart crow, beautified with our feathers. But the question is, how did Shakespeare begin his career in the literary world of London? Well, friends, you would be surprised to know that he began his career in the world of theatre as an actor. Gradually, with time, he took to writing and created an identity for himself as the Bard of Avon. During his lifetime, he had written 37 plays, 154 sonnets, and 2 long narrative poems. So how is Shakespeare relevant today? People also refer to Shakespeare as the national poet of England, mainly because, as an artist, he is the master of analyzing human behavior. Even today, the contemporary works of cinema are based on Shakespeare's plots, where you explore the dark side of human nature in the emotion jealousy, portrayed by the protagonist in the play Othello, the Indian adaptation to which is Omkara. Similarly, the passive side of human nature is represented through melancholy in the protagonist Hamlet. So which age did this great writer of all times belong to? He belonged to the Renaissance age, also known as the Age of Awakening, where focus was on the beliefs of humanism. What is humanism? Humanism is when human needs were given more priority over religious beliefs. So what social changes helped Shakespeare to evolve as a writer? The first factor was that during those times, England flourished in literature by adopting new styles of writing from other countries. But how did this happen? This was possible as trade flourished in the 16th century, thereby promoting the translation tradition of the works in England. Today, we shall study the verse form that inspired the writers to write on the theme of love. That form is sonnet, which is inspired from Italy. Even the word sonnet has been inspired from the Italian word sonetto, that translates as little sound. So what is a sonnet? A sonnet is a short poem of 14 lines that is used to express personal thoughts and feelings for an individual in first person. Hence, sonnets alluded to an important person in the writer's life. For example, Sir Philip Sidney wrote the work Astrophil and Stella dedicated to Lady Penelope. Edmund Spenser wrote Amority dedicated to Elizabeth Boyle, and Michael Drayton wrote Ideas Mirror dedicated to Anne Goodyear. The essential requirements in a sonnet include a single theme or idea, a single speaker who expresses his emotion for his beloved. Now let us look into the important literary devices that are mostly used in a sonnet. The first is chiefly personification, because personification helps to express the energy of the emotions. The second is metaphor, that helps to express the strength of the feelings that the poet wishes to express. Now let us look into the types of sonnets that were written during the Elizabethan age. There are in particularly 3 types of sonnets, the first being Petrarchan sonnet, the second is Spenserian sonnet, and the third is Shakespearean sonnet. The name itself represents the writer who has popularized the sonnet form. The first sonnet is the Petrarchan sonnet, inspired by the Italian poet Petrarch, who dedicated his sonnets to a lady named Laura. Similarly, the names Spenserian and Shakespearean have been derived from the names of the writers who have popularized this style of sonnet. So, who introduced the sonnets to England? This was a joint venture by Sir Thomas Watt and Henry Howard, who published their sonnets for the first time in a collection called Totel's Miscellany in the year 1557. You would be surprised to know that this was actually the first printed anthology of English poetry. Now let us look into the structural elements in a sonnet. In a sonnet, the three important aspects that are important is the first is the total number of lines in a stanza, the second is the rhyme scheme, and the third is the meter. Let us begin with the first one, that is the total number of lines in a stanza. This aspect helps you to differentiate between the different types of sonnets that were written by different writers. For instance, if a stanza is comprising of 2 lines, it is called a couplet. If it has 3 lines, it is a tercet, 4 lines, quatrain, and so on and so forth. Hence, if we look into the 3 kinds of sonnets that we have studied, Petrarchan sonnet usually has 2 stanzas. Similarly, Spenserian sonnet and Shakespearean sonnet has altogether 4 stanzas. The division of lines in these stanzas include where a Petrarchan sonnet has 8 lines followed by 6 lines. In Spenserian and Shakespearean sonnet, you have 3 stanzas in the quatrain fashion followed by a couplet. The second characteristic feature is a rhyme scheme. What do you do in a rhyme scheme? We always look into the last words of the lines. So as you can see, the sonnet that we are soon going to study, you can see the last lines represented in front of you. So the words that you'd be looking at would be minds, finds, love, remove. So it is AB, AB. That would be the rhyme scheme. Now, the rhyme scheme for all the 3 kinds of sonnets is different. Hence, a Petrarchan sonnet, the rhyme scheme would be ABBA, ABBA, that is the first 8 lines, followed by the sestet, which is CDE, CDE, or CD, CD, CD. Similarly, in a Spenserian sonnet and Shakespearean sonnet, the rhyme schemes are a bit different. Can you identify the difference between the rhyme scheme of a Spenserian sonnet and a Shakespearean sonnet? Well, the difference is that in Spenserian sonnet, the rhyme scheme is linked to the previous lines. So you notice that in the first stanza where we have AB, AB, the line B continues in the second stanza also. Whereas in the Shakespearean sonnet, the rhyme scheme is having no link with the previous stanzas. So every new stanza starts with a new rhyme scheme. It is AB, AB followed by a new rhyme scheme, CD, CD, EF, EF, and lastly, the couplet GG. Now let us look into the third structural aspect in a sonnet, which is a meter. Meter usually is accounting 2 important aspects. The first is the distribution of the pattern of the syllables, and the second is the total number of syllables in each line. Syllables are usually represented in 2 types. It can be a stressed syllable or it could be an unstressed syllable. For example, when we use the word hey, there is 1 syllable used in this word. But when I say London, there are 2 syllables represented in this word. So, 2 syllables combine to form 1 foot. There are different types of foot. However, in a sonnet, the feet that is usually used is iambic. In an iambic feet, the pattern includes the unstressed syllable followed by the stressed syllable. So if we look into these lines, you will notice that the distribution of the syllable is always according to unstressed followed by stressed. That's why the beat is popularly known as da-dum, 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 da-dum. So that would be the iambic beat or the rhythm. The second is the number of iambic feet in a sonnet are usually 5, which is the reason why it's called a pentameter. Now, how are feelings expressed in a sonnet structurally? This can be represented in two ways. First would be the Petrarchan fashion, and the second would be the Shakespearean or Spenserian form. In the Petrarchan, which is comprising of a octane and a sestet, the starting lines, that is, the octane, usually represents the argument that the poet wishes to discuss. The ninth line is the volta, also called the change of thought, and the concluding stanza is the summary of the main idea. Whereas, in the Spenserian or Shakespearean sonnet, you'd notice that the starting stanza is always an argument. The ninth line is also the volta. Quatrain has the theme represented in the sonnet, and the concluding couplet has the summary of the main idea. Now let us look into the evolution of sonnets over the ages. Sonnets were written for religious purposes. For instance, John Milton from the Puritan age has written the sonnet on his blindness. In the 17th century, John Donne has also written holy sonnets dedicated to the aspect of religion. In the Romantic age, sonnets were written to express the beauty of nature. One such work was written by the Romantic poet William Wordsworth, who wrote Composed upon Westminster Bridge, September 3rd, 1802. In the Victorian age, women also contributed to the sonnet by expressing their feelings of love and sorrow. Among them include Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who wrote her collection Sonnets from Portuguese. Wait a minute. OMG! Change in the number of lines in a sonnet? Yes, indeed. This change was visible in the work of George Meredith, who wrote his sonnet Modern Love that comprised of 16 lines. The work focused on disloyalty in love. Another poet from the Victorian age, named Gerald Manley Hopkins, wrote a sonnet of 11 lines called Curtal Sonnet, which was a modification of the Petrarchan sonnet. Now, I'm sure that you know what a sonnet is all about. Whew. So let's begin with the sonnet, which is True Love. These sonnets were dedicated to two unknown mysterious individuals, and they were published in the year 1609. Sonnet 1 to 126 were dedicated to a young man whose two initials were only provided, that is W.H. Critics believed that this was some person William Shakespeare knew in his life, that is William Herbert, probably. And the other person was a dark lady, for whom the sonnet 126 to 154 were dedicated, and critics believe again that this is probably a lady named Mary. So let's begin with the sonnet True Love by William Shakespeare. The poem starts with the lines, "Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments." In these lines, it almost seems as if the poet, like a priest, requests the world not to create obstacles in the path of true lovers who have united because of emotional compatibility. What we notice ahead is that Shakespeare represents the ideas or the principles which are not conditions of love, which is why he says, "Love is not love, which alters when alteration finds." Because love is something which is about acknowledgement of the person for whatever that person is. So, alteration here represents the act of changing the persona of the person. You do not accept the person for who that person really is. For instance, in the scene in front of you, you notice the girl addressing her concern of changing the persona of the man because she wishes him not to smoke. So here, you notice the idea of change, that is alteration, which is about to take place. Whereas in true love is mainly about acceptance of the person even with the negative traits. This is why he calls true love not love if it is based on the principle of alteration. In the other condition, he also talks about that or bends with the remover to remove. The remover here represents the aspect of distraction, where an individual is not attentive to the person he has his concern for initially. and is easily deviated and distracted by other distractions and beautiful objects around. Because in true love is technically about endless devotion for each other. That is what the principle of loyalty is all about. In the next lines, you notice the defense that Shakespeare represents in order to tell the true definition of love by using the exclamation, "Oh no!" It is after this line that we get to see the just way of following a true love. Hence, we get to see the rules of love that help us in understanding the true strength in a relationship where there is true emotional bonding. He starts this defense by stating it's an ever fixed mark. The fixed mark here refers to the pole star, which never changes its position. It can also be an address to the lighthouse that stands tall during a storm. Hence, the fixed mark refers to the quality of consistency in true lovers, who are able to withstand or endure the metaphorical tempests like financial issues or social issues. In the next line, he states, "It is a star to every wandering bark." Here, in these lines, the poet creates an imagery of a lost traveler at sea who looks up in the sky for the North Star to trace direction. Hence, with this image, he attempts to throw light on the directional quality of love that helps lovers to navigate uncertain situations of life. And in this way, the lovers are able to instill optimism in each other that helps them to find direction in the course of life. In the lines, the worth unknown, just like the pole star that helps the sailor with adversities, true lovers' worth is realized only in difficult times. So, how do you measure the height of true love? That is through moments of selfless devotion that helps to strengthen the emotional bond. In the next quatrain, Shakespeare compares love with strong universal force of nature, that is, time. In the stanza, time has been personified as a king who is able to control humanity by forcing mankind to follow his dictates. In fact, the strength of time is synonymous to the sickle, that is a grass-cutting blade that leaves its mark on everyone without discrimination. Hence, time is able to impact everything in its surrounding. It is able to mark the vitality of youth that have been symbolized as rosy lips and cheeks, thus reminding us of our mortal existence. The trait of longevity in love has been represented through the illusion of doomsday from the Bible, which is the day of judgment, when the world would come to an end. Despite such adversities, true love is going to last for eternity. In the concluding lines of the sonnet, which is a couplet, reflects the confidence of the poet. This confidence has been gained with experience in life, because of which he is ready to give up his writing career. This shows the talent of the writer in portraying the honest picture of human nature. Even contemporary writers like Ben Jonson of Shakespeare's time have appreciated him by saying, "He was not of an age, but of all time." And thus, we notice that his works are definitely leaving an everlasting impact on the coming generations, even ahead of us. That brings us to the end of this lecture. I hope that the lecture was enriching for you. If you liked the lecture, don't forget to hit a like and subscribe to the channel. And most importantly, don't forget to share, because sharing is caring. This is me, Karishma. Until we meet next time, take care.